Welcome back. Now that we know in which direction we are heading, let's start tweaking the Whitewater source. As you can see, we have a new camera here, which will be also our render camera later on. If you have your own scene and you are not starting from the 04_03 start tip, then you can just copy the camera into your scene. As you might know, you can copy nodes between two Houdini instances, so that should be pretty simple. Okay, so let's take a look in our Whitewater source here. In the first clip, we linked here the merge guided ocean layer to our flip cache, and then the stream here gets split. One are the volumes and the other one will go into the Whitewater source. So this one here is the interesting one for now. Let's jump to a later frame, for example 24. Actually, in here is no simulation, so you can also cache it out, rendering on several nodes if you have. So let's make sure that we also see our boat here, but not the simulation. Interrupt it and jump one level up and make sure that this node here is not visible, because that imports the simulated Whitewater. Okay, that should be fine. Back to our Whitewater source, and now you can see that it's emitting here where our boat is hitting the ocean. Let's take a more detailed look to the parameters here on our Whitewater source. So we have emission, a general emission tab, and then it's split up in curvature, oscillation, and vorticity. So you can see that on all of these tabs here is always a minimum and a maximum value, and between these two values the emission will happen. So at first we can adjust the minimal and maximum speed. If you lower this value here, you will see that we get more emission. You can see now here are more emission points because we said the minimal speed has to be 1 so that the emission happens. Let's put it back to 2, and there is automatically a ramp of the emission between the minimal and the maximal speeds. So at the max speed the emission value will be 1, and at the minimum speed actually it will be 0. So down here you can visualize the emission. So you can see that these points here, which have a high velocity, so a high speed, they will emit more than these points here which have a lower velocity. So you can always visualize the emission, and this option you have on all of these tabs here. So we can visualize the curvature emission or the velocity angle, for example. So there are several tools to analyze your ocean and find the correct emission values. So let's start tweaking it. For the min and the maximum speed, it's actually fine with our ocean here, but we will limit the emission by depth. So with this option you can limit the emission under the water surface, because normally under the water surface there will be also emission points for the bubbles. So we will just limit this maximum depth a bit. So put 0.25 here, so that we get a bit of emission here, but not as much down to the whole ocean. To see it better, let's jump one level up and let's display the guided ocean layer fluid here. And let's jump back into the Whitewater source. Now you can see that we just have emission points here on top of our surface. If we disable this toggle here, you can see that we have many emission points down below the water surface. It's good to have some for the bubbles, but most of the stuff won't be visible underwater, so let's limit the depth here to 0.25. Okay, that's fine. Let's disable the guided ocean layer fluid again to see better the emission. Back in our Whitewater source we're going to tweak the other emission values as well. Output points is automatically toggled on here. That's fine because the volume output is here on the right side, so that's fine. And we also don't want to keep the non-emitting points. Let's take a look at the curvature tab here. To better see which points are actually the curvature, let's just disable oscillation and vorticity for the moment, and you can see that there are not many points left. So to have a bit more emission from the curvature attribute, let's lower it to 5 here. That's fine, and the velocity angle is fine for the moment. Let's take a look at the emit from oscillation. This is one of the most important values. As you can see, here are the most points which gets emitted, because the oscillation basically compares on 2 frames the velocity, and then you have this attribute. To get a bit more emission also from particles which don't move so fast, let's lower the minimal oscillation here to 20, because actually our ocean has many low frequency waves which are not moving so fast, but we still want to have some emission. And the last thing here is the vorticity. Actually there's nearly no emission from the vorticity. To get a bit more, let's lower this value here to 15. It's not the most important one in this case. The vorticity would be more interesting in a whitewater river, for example, where we have a lot of twirling water. Okay, so make sure you enable again the emission from these other two attributes here, otherwise we won't have enough emission. Let's take a quick look at the sources tab. There you have different options how to emit your emission points. Basically the particles and volumes emission is fine. And if you created this with a shelf tool, all these values here are already linked to your main flip simulation, so just make sure that here is a correct link. Distribution here is not important for us now. If you have several nodes to simulate your whitewater on, you could add a division type here so that it will be split up in several divisions and every computer could compute one of these divisions, but that's not the case here, so let's just disable it. Visualization, you could just show the surface. Also sometimes it's useful, but it's a really high res, so sometimes it gets slow. And here the cache option we won't use. I would recommend using this file cache node here if you want to cache out the whitewater source, which makes sense if you don't have enough memory in your machine. But before caching it out, we are not done yet, so we will insert a custom node here to add some noise to our emission. Because in the research phase I noticed that it's sometimes really uniform, and the noise is a nice tool to break it up a bit more. Even if there's a noise in the whitewater emission in the DOP network, we will use one here, so we have the option to visualize it better. So let's drop down a point VOP, connect it here and also display it. So that's our emission for the moment, whitewater source. And let's see here in our point VOP, let's dive in. And the idea is now to apply noise to our points, and then we will remove the point which get below a specific value. Okay, so let's drop down the turbulent noise here and make sure you connect the position. And type 1D noise is fine. We reduce the original Perlin noise and let's crank up the roughness to 1. For the frequency here, it would be good to visualize it. So let's just quickly connect our noise to the color attribute, and now you can see pretty good what you are doing. Let's increase the frequency here to 2, and for the y-axis we will lower the value pretty much, so there's not so much difference. That's fine. And let's also lower this value a bit so we have more streaks going like this here in our noise. That's fine. And now we need to remove the points which are below a specific value. We could just use a blast node, but actually this here is faster. So do a compare. Output of the noise in input 1. Let's say here less than or equal. And next we need a two-way switch which will decide which points gets deleted. So this is our condition. And input 1 here is the point number, ptnum. Just plug it in here. That's fine. Let's keep it clean. Okay. That's just a visualization, so we can disconnect it for now and use the remove point node here. So actually here we get the output as a point number. If the compare has a 1, we get a boolean value, the condition is fine, then the point number will be passed on and actually deleted. If not, then a 0 will be outputted and the actual point won't be removed. Okay, as you can see here, it's already working. If we deactivate it, the points are there, and if we switch it on, we lose some points here. Okay, that's fine. That will just break up the pattern a bit. So let's call this here VOP noise. Okay. And now we are done preparing our source. I would just recommend dropping a cache node down here. I mean, you have to keep in mind that this will cache everything into your memory. So in some cases it can slow down everything, but if you have enough memory in your machine and you have this cache node here, then the result of these calculations will be cached in memory, and if we iterate in the whitewater solver later on, it will be much faster. Before caching it out here, the whole simulation, it's good to disable this node, because otherwise it will fill up the memory, but we will take care of this later on. So we are done in this clip preparing our whitewater source. See you in the next one where we will tweak the actual simulation.